Welcome back. Now, with next week's G20 summit in Seoul, South Korea, set to tackle global economic imbalances and currency tensions, just what impact will the shift in the US balance of power in the wake of the Republicans winning big in the midterm elections prove? And what of change we can believe in? The catch cry once trumpeted by Barack Obama, whose Democrats were as good as decimated at the polls, now full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Joining me now, CEO of the US Studies Centre, Geoffrey Garrett. Great to have you with us, Geoffrey. And certainly the angst is all too apparent for Barack. The reality of going to a G20 leaders meeting, though, when that wipeout has been so significant, the worst in about 70 years for a party, how can he contend that he has any ability to do anything other than just try and shore up his US audience?
Well, of course, as you know, Carson, the president is the only representative of the country offshore. What happens in Congress often takes up a lot of time in the media, but it ultimately doesn't matter so much in policy terms. And I think actually G20 and currency and trade imbalances is a very good example of that. Under Bush, the Democrats were pushing really hard to bang on China. Under Obama, the Democrats were. But both presidents actually resisted those temptations. I remember Tim Geithner famously said in July that the currency was China's own business, not America's business. And
that was interesting because coming from a Democrat, well, I mean, not to say that was an explicit Democratic call at all. As you said, it was the Treasury Secretary, but it's always been said that the Republicans would go soft on something like that against China because they know it's always winners and losers, and they'd lose out big time. Is that going to be the thematic?
Well, I think, if you think about China policy in the US, you get anti-China sentiment from the left and the right. So on the left, it's human rights and trade, and on the right, it's, gee, China's too aggressive a military power. But I think we do have this remarkable continuity out of the White House, really going back to George Bush, the father, that says economic engagement with China and softly diplomacy. And in the context of the G20, I think what that's going to mean is that there'll be a lot more solemn declarations about reducing global imbalances, but not a lot of hard-edge stuff, because all the action is behind closed doors and probably in terms of domestic policy in the US and domestic policy in China rather than anything on the international stage.
Because whether you balance it out and declare that there's been a shift in the president's skew more towards foreign affairs, which has often been the criticism that they retreat into that realm when domestically it's all got too hard. Is he at that tipping point that he could arguably over-edge himself and go into foreign policy?
Well, everyone's looking back now at Bill Clinton. Certainly, I think Obama, never a big fan of Bill Clinton, is now probably looking at the Clinton playbook. And if you look at that, it had tacked to the centre domestically, become the party of fiscal responsibility, pro-free trade, and more emphasis on the foreign policy agenda. And I think there's evidence that that's exactly where Obama is tracking today.
This idea, though, that the outcome that we've ended up with this week is a further polarisation, that we've got candidates further on the right, the Tea Party, the putative now organisation that will put forward a candidate, arguably to run for president, and perhaps vote over the heads of the Republicans, and ditto with the Democrats. Those who are back in are more extremist than ever. What does that say about coming into the centre? Well,
gridlock is obviously the word of the day. And will the gridlock be worse this time than it was in the mid-1990s? Plausibly, yes, because there does seem to be more of a partisan divide. But if you look at the issues, I think there is some room for agreement quite quickly. So my biggest prediction today would be that there'll actually be pretty fast movement towards extending the Bush tax cuts, both on average Americans, Obama's commitment, and on Americans earning more than $250,000, which is what a lot of the Republican Tea Party animosity was about, that Obama was going to roll back those cuts, which were going to be job killers.
Yeah, for the small to medium-sized businesses. So that's a sensible policy, but you can't turn around a country just with a one-hit wonder. No. I mean, are you saying on issues like financial reform, on immigration, which are keenly overdue for attention, that there's a sense of something coherent, something
Well, I think
intelligent?
let's talk about three issues that might be on the table in 2011, immigration, financial reform and healthcare. Financial reform, as you know, the bill's been passed into law. It's all about implementation now. A lot of that stuff will have to go back to Congress. The Republicans aren't happy with it. So you'd expect that to move a little more slowly than otherwise. Immigration, no chance that comprehensive immigration reform could pass. So if it comes up, it'll be a political football with both sides doing some position taking. But I think the real worry at the moment is that there'll be a war over Obama's healthcare reform. I don't think there's much chance that the Republicans will be able to reel in the healthcare or roll back the healthcare reform. But the Tea Party was galvanized around healthcare, so you'd expect the Republicans to make a big push on this. That'll be position taking in Congress. It'll probably be more of a waste of time than anything else.
So you've got this idea of potentially confrontation v conciliation and ending up doing nothing, and then actually though doing enough to destroy hopes of reform in other areas because you've got up so many people's backs.
Well, that's the negative rendering. So the positive rendering is the tax cuts get extended. Then you do something to start looking at spending cuts, which will be extraordinarily difficult, always is. But I think the quiet hope is that, as you know, there are a lot of signs in the US economy that things are turning around. So corporate balance sheets look great. They're just not investing. Growth's at 2%. It's not enough to change the unemployment numbers yet. Stock market recovered. Again, a big move today.
And yet still those voices of discontent seem to disproportionately grab the headlines. The Dr. Dooms of this world get into print. The media like it. And is it a case of the White House going on the front foot now to discredit, actually saying enough of that? That's been so poisonous thus far. We're not going to allow it to continue. Well,
it's really tough for the president because if you look at the Main Street economic picture, it's extraordinarily bleak. So we have 10% unemployment, an effective unemployment rate close to 20% with part-time work and people who aren't even looking for jobs anymore. Then you look at the housing sector, and the best estimates are that a third of mortgages are underwater by about 1/3 of their value, and then poverty statistics, 1 in 7 below the poverty line. So you have this disconnect between Main Street, which is in incredible pain, and these signs on Wall Street and elsewhere that the economy is recovering. So it makes it pretty hard, I think, for anyone to lead in that environment.
It's almost two economies sort of running in tandem, pretending they can exist without some kind of grating tension that almost proves too much.